Well, good morning and welcome to the church office. My name is Gavin, and it's a joy to welcome back Jules and Andy. Lovely to have you guys on again.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us back, Gavin. It's great.
It's fab, and it was wonderful to hear about UCAN, and the work that you guys are doing is just brilliant. So today's focus is on church administrators and operations directors. What are some of the challenges that they face in their roles today? So one of you, do you want to kick us off? What are you guys hearing from your members? What are people experiencing in the jobs that are tough?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off. That's a great question, Gavin. I'm going to pick on the word today, if I may. Mm-hmm. So it's because who would have thought we'd be in this kind of scenario right now? Yeah. So I think for me, thinking of those roles across whatever church denominational flavour they're in, they're just, for one, really, really exhausted right now. Because whereas a number of ministries, when churches have had to close, a number of ministries have changed or even closed down or done, pared things down. Actually, for those in church administration and ops, it's just got even more difficult and more intense. Yeah. They've had to just learn new skills and take things onto digital. That's been for a long time. And as soon as what we're hearing from our members is, as soon as they thought, okay, we've risk assessed how we open up safely with COVID and socially distancing and all of that, did that for a while, then legislation changed again and they had to change everything. For 18 months, I think exhaustion is the main challenge right now. And the reason I pick on that is because they're not going off on a summer sabbatical. For us in these kind of roles, actually on the back of a really tough 18 months in this role, then they're the ones who've got to be planning for after the summer, after people have rested. Already in these roles, they're thinking about Christmas and they're thinking about the summer break when people have had some community and had some holiday, they're regathering. So for me, I think the biggest challenge is how to handle that when you're exhausted, there is no gap, and you've got to get ahead on the pre-planning foot. And all the time still thinking, we think we know where it's going, but actually it may still change. Massive challenge, I would say.
I think that's a really good point, isn't it? Yeah, because even people in our church office who work for me are saying, can I still take my holiday? Even though we've been furloughed or we haven't had the chance to do holiday, are we still okay to take it? And there's what you're saying there is we've really got to look after those operations and those church administration staff. It has been a really tough 18 months, and the responsibility on their shoulders has been a lot, hasn't it, to carry? I think you make a really good point, and looking after people is really important in this season. Yeah, Andy, what would you add into that, mate? Yeah,
I mean, just sort of picking up on that summer break thing. I think it's a really crucial point to hold in the way that you operate as a team at church, because it was continually the sort of challenge and dynamic that we had to deal with at my home church when I was on team there, and I've seen in many other churches, is a sense of certain roles get to the end of the summer term and it's sort of end of school feel, we've crossed the line, school holidays, let's go down the beach now sort of thing. And then there tends to be a sort of skeleton crew left in the church office over the summer break with all the things that can't stop and need to be in place. And then in September there's sort of a new school year fear where people bound in going, wasn't the summer great? And people thinking, what summer? We've been here. And although aspects of that are bound to be the case, certain roles do have a particular termly focus and others don't. My encouragement would be for people to be realistic and intentional about how you manage that, because it's never a surprise. We're on this annual cycle every year, and I think this year some of the pressures and brain strains and weariness will be greater, but actually we do go around this cycle every year, and for those who are listening who have an area of influence over how the organisation is managed and how staff are encouraged to take adequate breaks at the appropriate time, please be intentional, with that. And the sort of leave management discussion is never make sure you use up your quota by the end of the calendar year. It's where do you need to use your leave so that you can flourish as an individual and have appropriate breaks. And if we can plan in advance for that, we can help the organisation manage that well. So, that was just a sort of a throw in on what, that very wise comment from Jules there. I think other areas, we're continually hearing back from people, things are getting more complex. The complexity is increasing, the governance requirements, the nature of compliance. It is all getting harder all the time. And then you throw in the digital streaming skill set into the mix as well, and the continual uncertainty about what are we allowed to do when. So that creates huge significant pressures. Absolutely. I think in the midst of all of that, though, the biggest challenge that I see from people doing these roles around the country is the same challenge. It's always been over my 15 years in church ministry, and probably actually, if you look back biblically, has always been the challenge. It's as organisations, are we functioning in a healthy way with clear vision and with a intentional plan as to how that vision becomes a reality? Because we experience and see a lot of organisational issues surrounding lack of communication or misunderstanding or siloed ministry, or people pulling in their own directions, or people just really trying their best but not being equipped with the clarity of, these are our objectives and this is what we're going for, guys. And despite all the changing complexity, that seems to still be the overwhelming issue, and I think always has been.
Yeah, no, that is really helpful, guys. It really is. And I guess everyone, we're talking about leadership that's needed in churches, aren't we? Those that are leading organizations, those that are leading other staff, needing to take a role on. We got together as a staff team and we were chatting about, imagining that we were a car, and, as we go forward, as we've kind of slowed down through the lockdown, what do we need to do going forward? What do we need to change in our team, on our car, to go forward? What's the terrain looking like going forward? And do we need to change the wheels? Do we need to improve certain aspects of what we're doing? And I guess it's a big encouragement, isn't it, for leaders and for teams to take that stock, take that breath, if you like, and go, what do we need to do going forward? And that is important, isn't it, Jules?
Absolutely. I love that analogy there, Gavin. And I think also when we're talking about teams, my passion is that teams in church are there to equip the whole body for service, and that's service, in the totality of where we are, wherever our influence is, but also service in the church so the church can flourish. And I just think one of the challenges that is going to come at us as we look at kind of that car analogy there is, it may take a while to get our volunteer teams back. Now, they are a vital part of our team too. I was just reading on the BBC last week something called the Great Resignation, where they're saying in any organisation, they're expecting 40% of staff to resign as a result of what people have lived through and just kind of reassess their life over the last 18 months. And then in looking at volunteer organisations, they're saying it may even be more than that. So actually, I think when there's been a pause in volunteer teams for at least a year, people go, why was I doing that? And in some cases, some people are still volunteering our teams because they feel they can't leave. And for some people, it's a sense of, if I leave, then the kids' team cannot run next Sunday. So some of our volunteers feel trapped in teams. That's not healthy. But I do think normally you get that kind of turnover, and it happens at a healthy rate, but a slower rate. But I think for ops and admin, I pray it's not true, but I've just got this sense that our volunteer rebuilding is going to be a massive challenge for us, because we're not in the case of they're always doing this and then they're kind of choosing to step off. It's actually, these teams haven't run for 2 years in some cases.
Yes.
So we're having to re-recruit them. And I think my plea, my hope is that actually that all of the church leadership and staff get behind that and don't leave that volunteer recruitment just to those that are administratively dealing with rotas. I think we need to be prepared for it.
I think you're spot on. It was something that I was chatting with our senior pastor, is that how can we have a season where there is some specific teaching into serving? you know, because those two things have got to work together, haven't they? We're saying, you know, church administration works alongside ministry. They're there to support each other. They're there to enable, and we need our pastors to be teaching, and our vicars and leaders, senior leaders, to be teaching on serving, to be teaching on, actually this season we need everyone involved, and we all need to play our part in the one another's together. Andy, what are your thoughts on this, mate?
Well,
Similar.
I love ripping off comments from Jules, because there's so much wisdom in what she brings there.
She's great, isn't she?
I mean, it's interesting to me that you've got to look at where the administrative function in a church gets applied towards volunteer management, because often churches don't do that justice, and they basically say the administration and operational competency that we have and functionality will just help push things around, like rotas and ensuring people know when they've got to serve. That's incredibly vital, but actually now that we've got some really good church management systems out there, like Church Street and others, that bit's actually quite easy now, a lot easier than it used to be when it was papers and Excel. The administrative function then needs to be applied to, actually, how do we care for our volunteers? How do we help communicate to them in a strong way? How do we envision them? How do we get feedback from them? How do we facilitate the means for other leaders of other areas of ministry to meet with their volunteers and value their volunteers? Because it's when that level of administrative and operational competency can be applied to all areas of ministry that you can say, actually, the volunteer, the team experience here is going to be a really good experience, because we've assessed, what do we want that experience to be, in its entirety, and where do we need to be administratively strong to fulfill that. I really do hope that we don't see a 40% exodus of teams. I'm sure there's going to be a significant number, and it's going to be a significant number of people who are hesitant to return to any aspect of corporate church life, and again, we're going to have to support that in an appropriate administrative way. And I suppose my without going into the details of how that could be approached, my one encouragement with that is the area of church administration or life, which often gets overlooked and is not done as effectively as it could do, is communication. Churches, they tend not to communicate that well or that consistently. So if people watching have got influence over how to handle that, always be ringing that bell of how can we communicate? What do people need to hear? When do they need to hear it? In what order do they need to hear it? And how can we reinforce that communication again and again and again to help people realise you're valued, you're supported, and we're listening to you through this.
Yeah, I had shared the same thing, Andy. I do hope that we don't see that 40%. I mean, I'm kind of on the other spectrum. I'm like excited, thinking we're going to have huge participation levels. People are going to come back refreshed and excited to try new things and get involved in new ministries. And I guess that's something that we as leaders can be praying for. We can be looking for opportunities to kind of connect people, to deploy people. We've got some new people that are, parents who are going to be serving in our teens ministry. And through lockdown, they've just got this huge burden that's just grown for young people. And I'm excited to kind of deploy people into those roles and support them. And I guess, I want to kind of be aware of what God's doing in people's individual lives through lockdown, good and bad. I'm hoping there will be that fresh participation. We'll see.
I mean, I think that and I think it's appropriate to be, both faithful and excited about potential, but also appropriately cautious at this point, in the sense of, I think that there is a pace that God wants us to sort of walk out of whatever the 2020 COVID reality has been, and the 2021 COVID reality, into probably what this next stage of COVID reality is going to be like, because it's not disappearing. And I suppose my cautionary word to churches would be, do pray into that significantly, and make sure that your autumn program for 2021 looks like what God wants it to look like, not necessarily what you want it to look like.
Yeah.
Because for so many, my feeling would be there needs to be a focus on restoration, recovery, and healing, of dealing with loss and uncertainty, and some of the sort of tough feelings that has thrown up this year, as well as a need to reconnect and be re-envisioned about the church's mission and why they're in your church, before we look at active deployment. And I would, off the top of my head, my sort of gut reaction on that is it's Easter 2022, which is the deployment time. My guess would be that a lot of stuff needs to be done before, healthy stuff and good stuff, and it will feel positive stuff, that needs to be done in the autumn, in the run up to Christmas.
No, I think that's wise, Andy. Yeah, I can't say I've got hundreds of people knocking on my door saying, right, release me into this ministry. But I think as well, there's a realistic. I was speaking to one of our elders who has been working at home all the way through lockdown, has been furloughed for long periods, and he was just saying to me, I feel like I've lost all my confidence, my ability to interact. Where do I fit? How can I, play my part? And for somebody like that, it's exactly what you're saying. There's a journey that needs to be go on. There's some teaching, there's some refreshment, there's some support that's needed to get people back to where we are. And we do need to be careful with our capacity, don't we? We don't just want to switch it back onto where we were before, but actually we do need to build up gradually. Jules, have you got any thoughts on that as we've been chatting?
I'm so glad to hear you say that, actually, Gavin. It's about capacity. It's such an important question to us right now, because I think, particularly for those of us working in ops and administration, if we're not careful, we end up carrying a burden that God says he's never asked to carry.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, if any church, any organization just becomes, okay, let's just kind of get busy. If particularly if our leaders are activists, it's such a trap we can fall into so quickly. And coming out of lockdown, I agree completely with what you say, that there's a period of readjustment going on. And we've been doing this, haven't we? Kind of speaking to each other via microphones and on screens. And actually, it's just, I don't know if you're finding it's just quite tiring to be back in 3D with real people for a while again. So I think my plea is, if we go into not even normal activity, but program activity, and doing a lot of stuff to be busy again, and if we do that too quickly, it is exciting and understandable. But if you strip all of that back and go, who's got to actually carry that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then at the end of the day, a lot of it falls to the admin and the ops teams. So one thing is vision casting. This is where, as Andy said, we need to be listening to God on how quickly and what is our key priority in our church for the sake of our community, what God wants us to be doing. We need to know that and do that first, and do that really well, and not add on lots of busy work, because otherwise I think what will happen is the admin and the ops people will feel that sense of coming out of the last 18 months. There might be financial challenges. There may be volunteer challenges. There'll definitely be capacity challenges. There'll be energy challenges, motivation, all of that stuff. They've got the challenge to sit with. And then if the church program is too active and too busy too quickly, they will be in that position of thinking, I've got to do that because everybody's ready for program and activity and, good things. Yes. Yeah. But they're in that place of, unbearable tension, to be honest, of there isn't the volunteer, or even I'm not motivated as an administrator. All this stuff is expected. And I think, to answer your original question, that is one of the big challenges for us that are called into this role. We really need to be careful to check ourselves not to have that martyr spirit of, I'm speaking to myself, I hope I'm not projecting.
Yeah, me too, guilty here. Yeah.
It goes in the territory a little bit of the, I'll do this because it's God's work and it's exciting, and I'll do this even if it breaks me. And Jesus says, no, actually, that's not a spirit I want on administrators. It's not meant to break you. So it's the early conversations with leaders to go, what's the priority? What's busy work? What's the timing? And have that agreement. Otherwise, admin and ops will step in and do it, even if it feels like it's going to kill us. And that's not right.
Yeah.
I mean, to reflect that back with your car analogy, Gavin, and again, I love the car analogy. But one of the things that, some people who don't use their car very much go, well, it doesn't need to be serviced every year because it's only done a few thousand. And this past year, our cars have only done a few thousand because we haven't been able to drive anywhere. But actually, inactivity of a car can cause rubber seals to deteriorate quicker. I mean, I know nothing about mechanics, but the things which are meant to be lubricated can get bunged up, and it actually needs some attention before it can get up to speed again. And I think there is that sense with looking at what's our infrastructure, what's our capacity, what's our energy levels, what's our level of enthusiasm, and can we get ourselves serviced and appropriately ready before we get up to full speed again.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And what you were saying about healthy organizations, you want these conversations to be honest, don't you, with leadership teams and the admin and ops teams to go, can we realistically do this? Because, when leaders come with faith and ideas and enthusiasm, we can sometimes feel like we're the handbrake that's going, whoa. And it can be quite hard in those situations, but we can see it sometimes negatively, but actually that can be a positive thing in those things. So actually, let's slow this down a little bit. Let's put the car in for a service. Let's do the work that we need to do going forwards. Somebody assess the terrain and give us some feedback on where that's going to be for not just the next month, but the next year. And to have those kind of longer conversations, it is important.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, because if you're asking those sorts of questions out of a spirit of negativity or I just don't think this is going to work, that's one thing that's not particularly helpful. But if you are asking those questions out of, I want to give this the best chance possible to work, then that's a great conversation, because you're saying to your senior leader, I'm for you the vision, it excites me, I want this vision to become reality. What's it going to take to do this? And I mean, I've been this huge fan of this book and this set of teaching called The 4 Disciplines of Execution for years. It's a completely secular book, but I mean, it's a book I was listening to I've read it loads now, but I was listening to the audio recording on the M11 at some point, and I just found myself weeping, bursting into tears on the motorway, listening to a secular management book, because I heard God's voice in it, and I heard God saying, I want my church to function like this. And part of what 4DX, as they call themselves, teaches is, there is limited capacity as to what you can get done with excellence, what you can get done in the most effective way. So a really helpful question is, what are the fewest battles we need to engage in to win the war? Which in effect is, what are the least, the least we can do? What are the fewest things that we can do to have the most impact on our vision and objectives? And so often churches plan the sense of, what are all the things we could do? So many great ideas, let's do them. Whereas actually, a disciplined approach to getting a job done would be saying, we don't have limitless capacity. What's going to have the most impact, the most leverage over what we're trying to get done, and can we focus on that? And I would think if there's any one question that an ops or admin team member should be trying to ask their wider team to consider going into the autumn, it's what's our capacity, and therefore what are the fewest things that we can focus on to have the most impact against our vision and objectives this term, and let's start with that.
Yeah, that's excellent, mate. Yeah, that book is excellent, isn't it? I've enjoyed reading it. And going back to the car analogy, one of the things that we talked about with our team is that the different staff could actually be sat in different seats in the car. So before, you were sat in the front and you were navigating and you had a particular role, but actually you may feel like you might not even be in the car actually because you've been furloughed, or you're sat in the back going, I'm in a different seat now. I'm now responsible for comms, or I'm now responsible for some of these tech things. And there could be that real uncertainty in the car. And Jules, what are your thoughts on, administrators adapting to different roles, and within this whole process, have you got any advice for people in that?
I think my starting point would just to do give a massive, huge kind of heavenly round of applause really to all the administration and ops people that have adapted. I think honestly, in churches up and down the land, they have done things they never even had on their job descriptions, and they've done them really well. They've learned, they've failed, they've tried again, so we are hugely adaptable as a gift in the church. And I think everybody just needs to go, yay me, in a right way, through the right lens, being humble, but going, yes, I've surprised myself because I've adapted. And that muscle has been flexed really. So I think advice would be, keep going, keep adapting, because we're not going to go back. It's not like there's been COVID and it's been different for a while. I'm convinced we're not going back to as church was pre-COVID. So I think we're still on a journey where the adaptation may be a little less rapid. There might be more time to be thinking things through, but church is going to need to continue to adapt. And our role, our functioning church, has got to keep being one that adapts and challenges in a good way. And I think, to link in my second piece of advice, we have to look after each other really, really well now.
Yes.
Something I've been saying in my team recently, particularly when there's pressure around these roles, you look for encouragement and you model it, you give praise. And, if we're not getting any, we have to model it and do it. And what I'm saying to those around, the ministry leaders, is right now, when there's a moment of pressure, in New Wine, we've got our digital event in 3 weeks. So it's big, massive pressure. Yeah, it's, so actually right now, leaders, it's either you find ways to encourage and praise, or you keep quiet, please. And that's what I'm saying, because at this point in time, find the little typo. There is no capacity. They just need encouragement. So I'd say, well done, we've adapted, keep going, but actually let's find and call out the positivity, encouragement, praise, that Barnabas spirit of encouragement to enable each other to keep going. They're the 3 themes that I'm certainly living at the moment.
I think that's great advice. Yeah, that's really encouraging. And I think also to add just slightly to that is that we need to also encourage our elders and our lead pastors, don't we, and our senior pastors, because they are going to feel it in a different way coming back to, it's been very hard, isn't it, for them to assess how healthy is my church? Who am I building with? All of those questions are really difficult to answer. What teaching do I need to now focus on? So they've got huge responsibility, and they need as much encouragement as we do in our roles, don't they?
Can I pick up on that for a second?
Yeah.
I'd even say right now that perhaps those roles need even more encouragement than we do, and we've got a role to play in that. And the reason I say that is because we're going to go back into function and team management and all of those things. Actually, our elders, our pastors, our vicars, they are walking back into all that we are, but also they have got to pastor the grief. And they are, I'm glad I've not been called into that role, but I think as those working alongside them, we need to pour huge encouragement into them. We need to be praying for them. We need to be working really well alongside them. We need to be taking what load we can off them so that they can pastor their flock, because there are depths of kind of pastoral challenge that I think our main and senior leaders are going to have to deal with in the next 15 months. That isn't our role, but they are going to be having sleepless nights because of the people they've got to be having conversations with. They don't need us, to be honest with you, making their job harder. So I think all of us, in these roles, let's do what we can to take things off them, to communicate brilliantly well. If we're not praying for them, then we need to start praying for them. But we've got to encourage those lead roles. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Andy, I know you've done so much work on first chair, second chairs working together, and obviously this is a very specific season that we're in. How have you encouraged people in ops roles and church administrations to get behind their leader? We're talking here about supporting them and prayer. What other things have you got that we can do as church administrators to get behind our leaders?
I mean, it's absolutely crucial, and I think it's crucial for ops leaders to recognise it as central to their calling. So when I function as an ops director of my local churches, my primary calling wasn't to be there to help the church administratively run well. It was there to help the senior leader thrive in their role by providing the support that they needed to do that. It's so important that that conversation and relationship develops between an ops leader, particularly if they're in a sort of second chair organizational role, and their first chair senior leader, where they realize, I am for you, I love you as an individual, I love you as the leader of my church, I'm excited about your vision, and I turn up to work so that you can lead well. And continue, reinforce that by how you are with them, how you speak with them, how you pray for them, and also what they see you do in their, in your role. If you can do that, then you've opened up the dynamic of being able to, be a critical friend to them at points, to be able to challenge them about, I see where you're going with that. Have you thought about this? You can do all of that if you've got that strong relational basis of, I'm here, for you and because of you. And my picture in ministry, and again, I've come back to this, loads in previous UCAN talks, is Aaron and her holding up Moses' arms, in the battle against the Amalekites. The battle is won when the senior leader isn't getting weary and collapsing. You're one of those ways in which their arms are held up, and reinforce that. I think from a practical point of view, it's therefore putting in the time to have the conversations to say to them, our capacity isn't limitless. So, what are the priorities? In this next season, what will it look like for you to thrive in your role? And therefore, what do I need to deliver to enable that to be the case? Can we risk assess together what are the issues that we see in the team or the organisation that's going to need some attention from us? And where do I need you to play your role as the senior leader? And where do you need me to handle this for you? And can I spot any of the pitfalls that we're about to walk into, so that we can actually not walk into that? Because, at points when people are weary, then they fall over in the pitfalls. If you can avoid them, there's no issue, when you get there. So it really is, it's appropriately, appropriate advanced planning, the right pace, and the practical sense of we're navigating this together, which is helpful. And again, to go back to your car analogy, much mileage in that car analogy. Actually.
There is.
but whichever seat that you're in the car, please do make sure you are all sitting in the same car and driving the same direction. Don't go in different cars, different places, because that's not the way to get the journey done at this point.
Yeah, that's good. When I brought it up with the team, one of our team members said, God's like the sat nav, who's going to map out the route for us. We've just got to follow the direction. He's going to make our path straight. And the car analogy can go, really, really far. And people can, it's helpful, isn't it, to have an illustration to talk around, because you can say, I think I'm here in the car. I'm sat here in the car. This is what I observe in the car. This is what I think we need to change. And it starts a conversation, which creates that healthy organization, which is great. But you've got so many good points there, which really relate into our heart and our attitude. From the Cutting Edge conference, when you spoke on this topic, I was just convicted again of what's my disposition to my leader? How do I serve them? How do I think about them? How do I pray for them? And I guess, Jules, now is a good time to reinvest in that, because a lot of relationships have been on Zoom or on phone. They haven't been in person. There could be some distance that could exist between relationships. How can we encourage folks listening to this to make a start on some of these things?
Yeah, it's a really great point. I think to quickly diary some time in is a really practical point, because, as I said before, otherwise it's very easy just to get into busy. But what I've certainly found is that actually I've had to have regular touch points. Yes, it's been on Zoom, but with my senior leader, had to have those regular touch points just to be reacting to everything. And if we're not careful, we can go, as we meet together, and there's some semblance of some kind of normality returning, of letting those drop because it doesn't feel like an urgent season. But I would say we've got to put some hard work into the relational not rebuilding, because, you know, I hope if we're working well in our roles, that relationship we're always putting work into it. But I'd say intentionally just reinvesting in that relationship again, and relationship in our teams. And I'd say in terms of heart and attitude, it's you've got to get to know how the other person ticks. So whatever your choice of model, whether it's Enneagram or DISC or Myers-Briggs or 5 Voices, there's a whole bunch out there. At some point, we need to understand what makes our senior leader tick. And I don't mean put them under a microscope and criticize, not that at all. But actually, if you can both use the same kind of tools, so that, you know, and my current leader that I work with in New Wine, we're actually almost the same profile in everything. So that working relationship is a dream, to be honest. My previous, when I was an ops director, my previous senior leader, we were the absolute opposite. So it wasn't until we completely understood that and did that work, we used Colour Insights and DISC, that we knew how to communicate with one another. And I would say that is really vital. It's respect for the other person. It's never understand them so they can become like you. It's the opposite. It's understand them so that we know how we need to be communicating with them, how we need to be behaving around them so that they flourish. So time, just kind of, reconnect is really important. And if anything slipped in your understanding of them, your understanding and taking responsibility for yourself, I'd say do a bit of hard work quite quickly, just to kind of remind yourself, you know, who they are, how they need you to communicate, how you need to encourage them, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great. There's like a resetting, isn't there? Yeah, that's useful. I suppose if you've got a leader that where relationship is working, you know, I guess there are going to be cases where it doesn't work, where things do go wrong, where the leader doesn't see the same importance as reconnecting. They just want you to get on with the job rather than, you know, align hearts and align priorities and things like that. What advice have we got for people who might be in that situation where it can be quite difficult?
I mean, the ultimate advice is, and it may be a bit too late for this bit, but the ultimate advice is don't let it get to a stage where there is relational difficulty, and please, therefore, for anyone who's got influence, make sure you're doing line management well and team management well. Keep people aligned and together and communicating well. Establish a staff charter, you know, set some expectations about vulnerability with each other and feedback and open. Do all of that stuff. Invest in team relationships, because it's the most significant thing you can do. And you know, we saw that with Jesus. He invested in the team relationship with the disciples.
Yes, he did,
It's what got his priority. You know, if you're in a situation where team relationships have been strained and people are not on the same page at the moment, you know, a couple of quick things on that. You know, really open, frank conversation is the best way to do it. So, you know, in a timely fashion now, meet together and say, something's not quite working here. I am for you, and my calling is to see you thrive. But we need to look at this and get on the same page as this. I remember from, you know, I was fortunate in always having a really positive relationship with my senior leaders over the years. But I remember that the most difficult and upsetting conversations I ever had with them were the ones I never had. And I was driving home from work going, oh, you know, this person really annoyed me today in their response to that. And I found myself thinking, no, they didn't, because I never spoke with that. And it's how I thought they were going to respond, which has upset me. So, you know, always have the conversation, talk things through, and help yourself to be aligned about the right way forward. If you need external support, find someone, make use of your trustees. If you've got trustees, church wardens, if you've got church wardens or external organizations, if that's helpful. But you do this all from a sense of, I am for you, I want you to thrive, and therefore, if things are not functioning well at the moment, we need to talk about that and agree how to go forward. And ultimately, you know, you are my church leader, you're my line manager, and we will go with the way that you decide, and I will implement that to the best of my ability. Because if there's ever a case where I can't do that, I will be exiting from this, because, you know, this role exists to help you thrive. and I'm not going to be any part of you not thriving. So again, it's about being open, vulnerable with each other, loving each other, and therefore being intentional. How is this going to work in the optimal way?
Yeah, that's really helpful, because I guess whenever there's conflict, there's cravings on both sides, isn't there? And I think I always try and remember, it's like eating a sandwich and you've got cream cheese. You're the last person to see the mess that's already all over you. And actually, you do have to say, the starting point for me is, do you know what? Where do I need to change? I've got some thoughts for you and I've got some feedback for you, but yeah, let me hear it from you. How can I be different to support you? How can my attitude, what are the things that you see in me? And that's why the gospel is so transforming, isn't it? We know we're sinners and we need grace, and we need grace in our roles, and that carrying the gospel with us is key in our work as a toolkit to sit down and say, let's work through this, let's resolve this. We love each other, we love Christ, and he's going to do a work in us as much as he is going to do work around us as well. I love that. Let's finish off our conversation talking about resources and things that we can point people to or encourage. Jules, where would you send people to refresh them, encourage them, just helpful things that we've talked about today? Where would you go?
Yeah, so great question. I have, rather than individual books, I've got a whole pile of books over here. I tend to have 4 piles of books at the same time, so don't judge me. But I'd say in terms of resources, always have something that's making sure that actually we're resourcing ourselves as first and foremost as a disciple of Christ. So for me, it starts there, because some of the things you were just picking up on there, Gavin, what's it like to be on the other side of me is a question that I think is a really helpful one in any working. And actually, I know I've got blind spots because the Lord isn't finished with me yet, because he's gracious. Right. But to do some investment on that. So obviously, the Bible, but also to be investing and reading. So I've got a couple of books going on, one from John Tice at the moment about beautiful resistance and not compromising in a culture. So that's my season at the moment. I'm reading on that. Then some of the things that we've talked about at the moment about team dynamics, one of my go-tos is Patrick Lencioni. He's got a wealth of things from the table group. And he's got it.
Here we go.
5 dysfunctions of a team, about team working. There's one that I keep finding myself going back to at the moment, which used to be called The 3 Signs of a Miserable Employee. I think they rebranded it.
Okay.
Negative.
It's a good name.
It's not named that anymore, but it basically says as people are coming back in, it's a brilliant read. It's an easy read. Everybody in any organisation needs to know that they are valued and what they do contributes to the bigger picture. And everybody also needs individual feedback from the person that has positional authority over them. So I'm just reading that again going, there's some key things in there that as we're working in teams, just to kind of refresh and remind ourselves, and feedback's really important. And the other one, that picking up on that first chair, second chair dynamic that we've chatted about today. It's a great book. It's not a Christian book at all. Coach of mine recommended it. It's called Consigliere. And it's basically looking at, in kind of organizational language, what it's like to be in the second chair position, but they're all different flavors of that. So it's knowing yourself as you work alongside those that are in the spotlight. I'm just finding dipping into that one again, really great resource. Tony Morgan, is any of his books on life cycles of churches, the unstuck church. It's almost like
it's like we planned it here.
It's not at all. So they're kind of my go-to resources. And also kind of a digital resource. If anybody hasn't come across Giant Worldwide, they have a whole thing called the Ascend program. Just Google Giant Worldwide, Ascend as well, ASCEND. They've got it's a whole free leadership program. You've got things in there like 5 Voices, 100% Plus, all free. That's just a great resource actually for any of us in these kind of roles.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. Andy, what about you, mate? You've got books lined up there.
Yeah, I love the Consigliere one though, because the Consigliere is the ops director of the mafia don in The Godfather. And I always said to my wife, if I wasn't a Christian and wasn't in church work, I'd be really good in the mafia, because I'm I'd be really effective at making decisive decisions which have impact. So
yeah, organised crime. Yeah,
that could be a fallback career for me. Two quick resources. We spoke about this earlier. 4 disciplines of execution. I love it. The beauty of this is you don't actually even need to read the whole book. I mean, it's great, and there's an audio version as well. But it's like a 40-minute YouTube clip by its author Chris McChesney speaking at a conference years ago to church leaders about this. And it's such a good watch. I mean, I watch that regularly just for the entertainment factor of it. So do get into 4DX. And then a bit of a shameless plug, but Sharon Clark has published this book with UCAN. It's called Spreadsheets and Prophecy. This is a realistic and encouraging book about what it is to be in church ops and administration.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a great read. We were so pleased to find Sharon and produce this with her. So do get hold of a copy of this, because it will encourage you and actually will say, yeah, someone has been where I've been in these scenarios, and this is how they approach them.
Yeah, guys, great recommendations. Love that. And thank you so much for your time. We'll call it a day there. And I know we want to get you guys back again. You've got so much wealth of wisdom and experience that we can draw in and learn, that I'm sure our listeners are just going to love it. So really, really thrilled to be able to partner with you guys and do this together. Is there anything that you'd like to say on UCAN before we go? Can you just go through the web address, Andy, just so people know where they can go and get resources?
Churchadministrators.net, very simple, and again, it's called that because of the the focus on its it's the administrators, it's the network, and so head to churchadministrators.net. Do join us if you want to be doing this as part of a membership network. But can we also say that we are huge fans of what you're doing at the church office, Gavin, and it is just this massive delight every time we get to work with you. So thank you so much for inviting us. We will happily be back if we're invited again.
Oh, you will definitely be invited, mate. Yeah, no, it's a real thrill to be able to do it together, and thank you so much for being on. If you're listening and you've got any questions, then please do send them in. I will happily forward them on to these guys, or if we can answer them, that we will. That's questions@thechurchoffice.co.uk. If there's anything that you have been affected by, then let me encourage you, go and talk to somebody about it. If you haven't got someone to talk to, then please get in contact with us, or you can. We don't want people to serve on their own and feel isolated. We want to encourage you and resource you in your work. So please do get in contact. I know that's all of our hearts to do that. So love that. Guys, thank you, and goodbye for now.
Cheers.
Thanks, Gavin. Thank you.
Bye-bye.